We start in the United States, where a historical event is underway. Former President Donald Trump is set to appear in a Miami court in the coming hours. He faces 37 federal charges in connection with his handling of classified documents. He's the first former president to be criminally indicted. Alan Fisher begins our coverage from Miami.
In a city which often prepares for coming storms, Miami is cranking up. Security around the federal courthouse has been increasing throughout the day. All agencies getting ready for the historic first court appearance of a former U.S. president on federal charges.
We're taking this event extremely serious. We know that there is a potential of things taking a turn for the worst, but that's not the Miami way.
Donald Trump landed in Florida in the late afternoon, met by a small group of supporters and protesters.
Lock him up! Can't be blocked. Lock him up!
I believe now, if he's back to the White House, he's going to be even better president.
He's staying at his Doral Golf Resort, a 30-minute ride from the court, where he'll surrender to the authorities on Tuesday. Once he arrives at the court, he will be officially photographed and fingerprinted. It's a federal court. There will be no pictures of him before the judge. He'll then hear details of the 37 charges. They include violations of the Espionage Act, obstruction of justice, making false statements, and conspiracy. In a series of social media posts, Trump again claimed the prosecution was political, a point he made at rallies over the weekend.
I never thought such a thing could happen to America. As far as the joke of an indictment, it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing for this country. I mean, the only good thing about it is it's driven my poll numbers way up. Can you believe this? Way up.
Miami's Republican mayor refused to get involved in the politics, just urging protesters to be peaceful.
I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm here in my role as mayor of the city of Miami, projecting confidence to our residents and to the residents of the country that we're going to be ready for tomorrow.
The court in Miami is known for pushing its cases through quickly. A rocket docket court is what they call it. So while Trump's team will argue that the prosecutions are malicious and should be dismissed, there's every possibility the former president could be on trial here within 6 months. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Miami.
And live now to John Hendren, who's outside the courthouse in Miami. Just a few hours to go, John, until former President Trump's appearance there. Set the scene for us there outside the courtroom. How has Miami prepared for Trump's court appearance?
Well, there are 6 hours still to go, Foley, so there's a long time for people to gather today. What we're seeing right now is a group with shirts on it that say Blacks for Trump. They are out here. There's also been somebody dressed in a prison outfit with a ball and chain saying, lock him up. So we are likely to have more people out here sort of choosing their sides. Not so many 6 hours ahead of time, but the police say that they have this town under control, both inside and outside of that courthouse. And there are some extraordinary procedures. Trump could enter underground. We might not even see him entering the building. And then from there, it's likely to be a procedure much like we saw in the indictment in New York, although this, of course, is a federal indictment. And as you heard Alan say there, that means there are no pictures inside. We won't be able to see the former president inside or hear his plea for those of us who are not in that room. But Trump will come here at 3 o'clock local time, a little over 6 hours from now, and he will issue his plea. We're told that plea is not guilty, and he has already been campaigning and fundraising on this indictment.
And yeah, we were going to talk about the legal aspects now, about what we can expect today. Former President Trump has, of course, continued to strike a defiant tone, saying that the Biden administration is weaponizing law enforcement agencies against him. What will be his strategy here going forward?
Well, that's a PR line the president has been taking. This is selective punishment, selective prosecution, and that is an argument that he can make in court. And I think in order for him to maintain that PR line, it's likely that his lawyers will do that. But there's a very, very high bar. This is a very different case than when Hillary Clinton was investigated for deleting emails on her personal server that had some national security content on it. It's very different from the President Biden case, in which some documents were found in a couple of locations, but his people immediately turned turned those documents over. Here we're talking about accusations of obstruction, of lying to federal officials. So the selective prosecution line is not likely to get him very far. We have heard him argue that he can declassify documents just by thinking about them. But we have a tape here, according to prosecutors, in which he acknowledges, while holding a document that he says is secret, that he does not have the power to declassify it. So he's already undermined himself on that argument. There are a number of other arguments that he could take. But, I mean, essentially what he argues outside of court may not have anything to do with what he argues in court. Traditionally, he has been making a completely different case outside of court than what his lawyers have been making in court. They have to follow the legal doctrine. They'll be trying to argue that these were not documents that Trump should not have had, that he had some right to them, perhaps, that he declassified them. And what other arguments they make, we're just going to have to see, because he's got very few avenues to go down to get out of these 37 counts, 38 if you include the count against his alleged co-conspirator. But this is all likely to last beyond the next election. So you can expect to hear him campaigning on it for at least a year to go.
And we will closely follow events there in Miami with you throughout the day. John Hendren, thank you very much for the moment. Earlier, I spoke to Greg Swenson, who's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. He says Donald Trump is being singled out, while some former presidents have done a lot worse.
I think it's clear that the president has made some mistakes and perhaps, didn't behave perfectly during this process. But I think the important distinction, it's not just an indictment of a former president, it's an indictment of the leading candidate in the Republican primary. So in many ways, it's really a destructive intervention into the 2024 election. And that's a sad day for America, not just for Republicans, but I think America in general. If some of what they're suggesting in the indictment is true, that he was somewhat cavalier in conversation. Now, granted, he wasn't talking to a foreign enemy or a spy. He was just having a conversation in his office with a journalist. But still, there's reasons for concern, and I think that should be left up to the voters at the ballot box. But by proceeding with this indictment, what you're really making it a political situation. It's the weaponization of the justice system. You mentioned Joe Biden's problems, and also if you look at Hillary Clinton and the email scandal from 2016, it looks like a two-tiered, double standard of applications of the law. And I think that really won't sell well with the American voters.